I'm doing quite well, and we, for a second week in a row, get to celebrate. There's another reason to celebrate. We were celebrating the mask mandate being struck down last week, and now we get to celebrate Elon Musk and Twitter. Why is this a massive victory for free speech?
Because Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist, Joey, sort of like you and me. So when the Constitution says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, it means no law. The cultural value underlying that is that no speech should be suppressed. So Musk believes that all innocuous speech is absolutely protected, and all speech is innocuous when there is time for more speech to rebut it. So I've been campaigning to be hired by him as his chief content officer because I wouldn't ban anybody's speech.
I was going to ask you that. If you were like the content officer, it pretty much, what would be the standard? Like a lot of folks have been broken.
I guess you'd have to ban speech that Congress has violated the First Amendment in order to characterize as illegal, like child pornography. I mean, you'd have to take that down, or you would be culpable in the criminal dissemination of it. But short of that, I mean, if somebody wants to say Joe Biden's a bum and he stole the election and Donald Trump was a saint and he really won, let them go ahead and say it.
Right.
Whether there's facts to back it up or not. The whole purpose of free speech is the listener decides what to listen to and what to believe, and whether, and if so, how to challenge it.
Now,
and Musk believes that. Now, the Twitter people have not only become fabulously wealthy, they've become fabulously left. So the board really was confronted with a decision that was an economically excellent one for them and for the shareholders, and they're the fiduciary of the shareholders. And the courts, if this were to go to court, would make a decision on the basis of economics, not on the basis of politics. So they really had no choice. He offered them so much money that even if he went around the board's back to a hostile takeover, he probably would have had a majority of shareholders saying, sure, we'll take your $54.20 a share.
And I love Musk. It's like he's going through teenage years, adolescent time as a full-grown adult, because he's openly talked about being having Asperger's. And so his sense of humor, he actually made the bankers, Morgan Stanley, work over the weekend so that they would sign the financing contracts on 420. Like he's constantly making these little jokes and jabs. But one thing that's come out of this, and you could pick, say, partisan hacks on the left, and there are plenty of partisan hacks on the left and the right. But say like the ACLU, what has happened to our friends on the left where they don't seem to be concerned with upholding free speech? They're now, the buzzword is hate speech or more moderation, these sorts of things.
Well, they characterize speech that they dislike or frustrates them or that they can't or don't want to rebut as hate speech. But hate speech is protected speech. I mean, the Supreme Court has ruled that under the First Amendment, which encourages open, wide, robust, even caustic debate. That's not me. That's a quote from a case that you and I have discussed several times. Times versus New York Sullivan, right out of Montgomery, Alabama.
Sir.
The whole purpose of the First Amendment is to encourage caustic speech. And if it borders on hate speech, which is speech that attacks someone because of an immutable characteristic of birth, your age, your race, your religion, your skin color, your age, whatever, that's protected. You reply with more speech. You don't reply with silencing it. Now, those are the rules that pertain to the government. Elon Musk wants those rules to pertain to Twitter. And of course, you and I think most people listening to us now applaud that. He doesn't have to do that. Twitter is a private bulletin board. They can post who they want and they can ban who they want. But if you want to enhance democratic values, give people a bulletin board, give people a town square where anybody can say anything that they want. And the value of the idea will rise or fall on its acceptance in the marketplace of ideas, not its volume and not the wealth of the person speaking, but its value in the marketplace of ideas. That's democracy as he understands it, as I understand it, as you understand it.
Well, and I love Elon for doing it. I'm looking forward to him implementing some ideas that don't always line up with sort of the history of free speech as applied to government, this new tech age. So stop it with the black box, the concealed algorithms. Let's make this open source. Let brilliant programmers and people work on those out in the open. Getting rid of these bot armies that don't actually enhance an experience. It looks like he really wants to take this platform and make it better, though I believe he said in a recent interview, it's not the economics to him. It is, to your point you just made, about having an open public square in a democracy.
Well, I'm sure there's some economics here. I mean, you don't invest 43 billion and not expect to get a return on that.
And the money, that's just a small bit of his fortune is amazing.
Correct. He's worth about 250 billion. I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling, staggering. Now, this is not going to happen overnight. The SEC is going to look at this. The shareholders have to vote on it. It could take as long as a year before people receive this money. What happens if the stock is worth more than what he's offered at the time he actually buys it? Well, it's going to depend on what the agreed amount of sale was. So if the agreed upon sale is, I think, $54.20 per share, I think that's what he's offering.
Right.
And the stock goes up to 56, he's made a killing. The stock goes down to 46, shareholders have made a killing. Welcome to the stock market in America.
Well, and I think the ramifications are clear to beyond any price you can really find, that this is a massive blow to, say, the establishment, those that want to control the conversation and do so in a surreptitious way.
You know, I had never heard of these people that own and ran Twitter until they started getting into all their kerfuffles with President Trump while he was the president. You know, when we were kids, the rich people were all conservative Republicans. Now the rich people are everything. The Twitter rich people are hardcore lefties, you know, ban Trump and ban people that challenge the standard version of Iran, of Ukraine versus Russia. They ban ideas that they don't like. None of that, as I understand it, if Musk follows through on what he promised, and he has a history of following through on what he promises, none of that will be the case any longer. Although, interestingly, I was surprised to see this. President Trump said he's not going to go back to Twitter. He's got his own business now. Man, his business couldn't tie the shoelaces of Twitter in terms of value and reach.
Well, and he was having trouble with his own brand. I think at a rally the other day, he called it Truth Central. It's Truth Social, Mr. President. But we'll see. I wonder if Elon's going to call his bluff and reinstate that account. And I've always said Trump will live as the ghost in the outrage machine on Twitter when he was banned. So, and I must admit, when I look back before he was president, the way that Donald Trump used Twitter, and while he was president especially, it would make me laugh. Sometimes it would make my hair stand on end, and then laugh later, like with the Kim Jong-un back and forth.
Right.
So there are certain things I would love to see. And this is the bottom line point. There's going to be plenty on Twitter. There is already plenty on Twitter I can't stand. It makes me want to throw my phone across the room. But that is freedom. That's the way it works.
Correct. Musk had a very interesting line in one of the interviews he gave. If people that hate me can say hateful things about me and I own the platform, then I'm doing the right thing.
There you go.
That is uncharacteristically modest for Elon Musk. And it is a brilliant articulation of his vision for this international bulletin board of enormous proportions.
Again, folks, we're talking to Judge Andrew Napolitani. You can always go to judgenap.com or check out Judging Freedom wherever podcasts are available. I usually check it out on the YouTube. I want to shift real quick, but keep this theme of free speech going. There are two stories, but one is the issue of the stripping of these special privileges and rights that Disney has had for decades. I didn't really think of it as a free speech issue when I first saw what the DeSantis administration in Florida had done. But I was a little heartbroken because I'm like, I kind of like having a private property, a private company govern itself and have all these rights to really, own the property, so to speak, as I think, would both understand owning a property. But what do you make of this, and what are the ramifications maybe for free speech and what DeSantis has done?
Well, the problem with the Disney and Florida relationship is corporatism, which is the government favoring certain corporations. So when Walt Disney bought his 25,000 acres outside of Orlando, he crafted a deal with the state of Florida, which would relieve his company of a lot of regulatory compliance and a lot of taxes. And it would, for Florida, bring tremendous economic boom to what was once a swamp in terms of jobs and tourism. It's been going on for more than half a century. So that symbiotic relationship, we'll pat you on the back, Florida. We'll make contributions to your political campaigns, politicians, and you leave us alone. That corporatism, that selection by the government of one competitor and relieving that competitor of the burdens that the government imposes on everybody else is immoral, economically counterproductive because it stifles competition. It's immoral because it's a form of bribery, and it's unconstitutional because it violates equal protection. I'm not arguing in favor of the equal application of regulations. I'm arguing in favor of no regulations, no corporatism, no regulations. Then you have true competition, which improves the product, improves the services, lowers the cost to consumers, and gives consumers more choices. You do not have that in Florida. Disney has no effective competition. It has some competition, but no effective competition. So what happens when Disney's taxes are reduced? Does the government spend less? Hell no. The tax burden is shifted to other taxpayers. So Disney is enriching itself through the government at other people's expenses. That's the definition of corporatism. And it goes back to the time of the revolution. It's an American temptation and addiction, and it shouldn't exist if we're going to have a free market.
Well, and I would encourage everybody to check out Patrick Newman's book, Cronyism. It's a new one that's out. It's fantastic, and people sometimes need to take the golden age view. As great as and as world historic as the founding was, there was a lot of cronyism. They were men just as much as anybody else. And it has been
the cronyism started right after we won the revolution. Before we had a constitution, the states began chartering corporations, and in those days, corporations were viewed as offspring of the state. So they had special privileges, which translated today means a monopoly. And who were those incorporators? The people that had loaned money to the state to raise the army to fight the revolution. I mean, it would be 100 years. It would be in the 1880s before the Supreme Court would recognize that corporations do not have special privileges, that they're entities created by their incorporators and investors and nothing more. Yeah. But the corporatism obviously still exists. I mean, Florida has been doing this since 1967. There's an express clause in the Florida Constitution that prohibits this, as well as the Equal Protection Clause in the American Constitution. But like a lot of these government violations, if nobody sues, if everybody's happy, it doesn't reach the courts.
Well, I want to go to one last thing real quick after we talked about the mouse. And this is a First Amendment issue. It's a case I believe you talked about yesterday on your podcast. I touched on it in passing like last week. And it's a football coach, a Marine out of Washington State. And he was holding prayer. We've had a lot of these controversies here in Alabama. I've got a gubernatorial candidate coming in soon. One thing they've talked about is we need prayer if it's free expression. What are sort of the stakes of this case? It's before the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah, so this ex-Marine and football coach, a Catholic named John Kennedy, had the habit of taking a knee at the 50-yard line, not in the middle of the field, at the sidelines, but on the 50-yard line, with his players at the end of the game, either to thank God for victory or to ask God for the strength to endure defeat and prepare for the next game. And he started doing this by himself, and then more and more of the players joined him. And then, of course, some of the players joined him, and some of the parents of the players objected. So the issue is this a question of free speech? Is it a question of the free exercise of religion? Or because he works for the government and he is an agent of the state, is there some coercion here on the part of teenage boys to stay? Can they leave? Of course they can. Is there a stigma if they leave? The court has always ruled that until you're about 18 and a high school graduate or finished with high school, it's difficult to resist the crowd, and there is a stigma if you resist. When I was a young kid, we used to read the Bible and say the Lord's Prayer in a public school till the Supreme Court in 1963 invalidated that. You had the right to leave the room, but nobody did because you'd stick out like a sore thumb. I think the court is going to find a way to say leaving the prayer is not leaving, departing from the prayer, not participating, is not a stigma. And as long as you can easily leave, the coach can say the prayer. I say that from what I heard of the oral argument yesterday.
Okay.
Where it's going to go, I mean, that's just my prediction. I think they're going to find a way to allow this under the free exercise clause. So the same clause that says you can't compel religious worship, the next clause says you can't interfere with the free exercise of religion. And the court has always had to balance those two. So we might be in store for a new balance.
Well, and I know there are a lot of folks around the nation, but especially here in Alabama, interested in that. It's still a hot political topic.
The coach I've seen him interviewed. The coach is a great man. He is a great human being. I hope there's some way that this can work out.
My parents solved this problem early when I went to Catholic school starting in preschool. And at Catholic school, well, we said prayers. It happens when you have a private.
Did the nuns slap you in those days, or was that out of vogue?
No, the nuns had moved on and we'd see them, and they were always kind and gentle. I missed the rulers on the knuckles.
I didn't never receive the rulers, but some of my buddies did.
Oh my goodness! I've heard about some northeastern Catholic schools. I've heard the stories. Absolutely. Well,
this is all pre-Vatican II. Post-Vatican II, the church is all watered down.
I'll put it this way. I'm not enough of a boxer to want to get into the ring with a nun. Like those ladies. I hate to even say that.